So, good morning again. This morning, I want to talk about the paradox of welcoming our suffering. And you'll recall in the Buddha's first teaching after his enlightenment, he expounded on the Four Noble Truths. And the first one was acknowledging the existence of suffering, what in the Pali is called dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A. And many of us, and especially in our culture, suffering usually is seen as an unwelcome guest, an intruder into this house of our lives, disturbing our peace, robbing us of joy. But the Buddha, in his infinite wisdom, suggested that we not resist or reject this suffering. Rather, he asks us to turn toward it, to welcome it as an essential teacher. And this is the paradox of welcoming our suffering. To embrace what seems unbearable, and in doing so, transform our relationship with it. Not get rid of it, because that's not going to happen, but transform our relationship with it, and ultimately our relationship with ourselves. I don't need to tell you, suffering in all its manifestations is an inescapable part of this human journey. The challenge is, what do we do about it? And it ranges from the pain of loss, the pain of illness, the pain of aging, to more subtler forms of dissatisfaction, restlessness, unfulfilled desires. None of us is exempt from from suffering. And our tendency is to feel upset or out of sorts as an immediate reaction to our suffering. Just to see it at face value, not really pay attention to the causal process that brought us to the suffering, or that brought the suffering to us, I should say, or seek to understand why we're having this reaction. So we expend tremendous energy often trying to avoid it, escape from it, suppress the experience of it, countless forms of avoidance that we humans engage in, and other species as well, for that matter, to run from it, deny it, distract ourselves from it, what in psychology we often call experiential avoidance. We seek distractions, we cling to fleeting pleasures, we construct identities that shield us from these uncomfortable realities of life. But as the Buddha taught, it is precisely this resistance to suffering that perpetuates it. It is precisely this resistance to suffering, this aversion to it, this denial of it, that perpetuates it. But by trying to escape it, we become ensnared in its web. We become entangled in it. Now, let me be clear. To welcome suffering does not mean we glorify it or seek it out, or do we have to like it, because certainly we do not. But what if we instead treat it as an opportunity to pause, notice it, and look into our suffering? What is it pointing us to that might need our attention? It's a wake-up call. See it as that, like a toothache that cries out for some attention. Letting it invite us in to recognize it, accept its universality and its inevitability, not to avoid it, not to run from it, not to find ways to distract from it, but to soften our resistance to it, and to meet it with a spirit of curiosity and compassion. Because I would suggest to you that suffering, when approached skillfully in this way, can be a gateway to profound insight and freedom. Now, unsurprisingly, as you know, the practice of mindfulness is central to the process of welcoming our suffering. It is particularly relevant, in fact, when it comes to working with suffering, because mindful presence invites us to observe our experiences. Remember, the Buddha talked about 3 categories of experience: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. But in each case, to observe them without judgment or attachment. Observe them without judgment or aversion. And when we bring mindful awareness to our suffering, when we bring our present moment awareness to it, we create a space where we can see it more clearly. We're not so busy running from it, distracting from it, avoiding it. We see it without these distortions of aversion. We see it without the distortions of fear. But welcoming suffering requires us to accept it as it is, rather than trying to wish it away or run from it. But this acceptance is not passive resignation where we just roll over for it. It is an active engagement with the reality that we're confronted with. So we can see the impermanent nature of our suffering. We can see the conditioned nature of our suffering, how it comes from past causes and conditions. So we let go of the illusion that it's a fixed thing or that it's personal, that it's just somehow the universe punishing me. So for example, when we sit with the pain of grief, we see how it arises and passes in waves. We examine it with curiosity. We see how it comes and goes, how it varies in intensity, how it shows up differently in our bodies, how it is interwoven with love and memory of what we have lost, how it connects us with this shared human experience of loss. Now, in this way, acceptance doesn't diminish our suffering, as I said earlier, but it does transform our relationship with it. It opens the door to greater wisdom and compassion. You know, in the Buddhist teaching, suffering is often compared to a fire that can burn away ignorance and delusion and reveal the truth of our existence, reveal the truth of impermanence and the other laws of existence. When we welcome our suffering, we allow it to illuminate the deeper causes of our discontent. And we often see that the roots of our suffering lie not just in external circumstances, but in the workings of our own minds, in our cravings, in our aversions, in our attachment to certain things. So much of our suffering, as the Buddha taught, comes from that internal experience, those internal experiences. For instance, consider the suffering of an unfulfilled desire. At first glance, it seems that the object of our desire, a lost promotion at work, a ending of a relationship with a romantic partner, or material possession, is the source of our dissatisfaction. But when we stop and pause and investigate it more deeply, we discover that our suffering arises not from the lack of the loss of the object itself, but it arises from our attachment to the belief that object was necessary for our happiness. And by seeing that, by gaining insight into that, we get some freedom from this cycle of grasping and disappointment. And it allows us in that moment to find some freedom, some relief from our suffering. Now, in addition, suffering can be a great catalyst for compassion. When we experience pain, we gain a direct understanding of the struggles faced by others. We see the universality of it. And this shared vulnerability, when we can see into it, helps dissolve the barriers of separation, helps foster a sense of interconnectedness. And in this way, our suffering becomes a bridge to the suffering of others. It helps us connect. It deepens our capacity for empathy and kindness. The paradox of welcoming our suffering lies in the fact by embracing what we fear most, by not running from it, we find freedom. We lean into our suffering with curiosity. We use our awareness and our wisdom to see what it is telling us. Excuse me, this is the essence, of the Buddhist path, to face the truths of impermanence, to face the truths of suffering, the universality of suffering, to face the truth of non-self with courage and openness, and to discover through this process the seeds of liberation. When we stop resisting suffering, we cease to be its prisoner. We cease to see suffering as the enemy. Rather, we see it and accept it as an unavoidable part of the human experience. We learn to live in harmony with the ebb and flow of life, the ups and downs, the pain and the pleasure, finding peace even amidst the challenges of life. Now, it's important to note that this transformation is not instantaneous. We all just don't leave here today and it's a done deal. Welcoming suffering is a practice. It's an acquired skill. It requires patience. It requires humility, and it requires faith in the promise of the teachings. Because there are going to be times when our pain, whether it's physical or emotional, feels overwhelming. Acceptance seems impossible in those moments. But it's in those moments we have to remind ourselves of the Buddha's teaching and his assurance that suffering is not an endpoint, it's a doorway to deeper understanding, greater compassion, and greater peace. So to welcome our suffering is to step into the heart of the human condition with courage and wisdom. To recognize that suffering, far from being our enemy, is a profound teacher that can point the way toward greater freedom. Now, this is not an easier path, but it is one that leads to greater freedom. The freedom to live with an open heart and to meet the joys and the sorrows of life with equanimity and the sorrows. To discover the boundless peace that the Buddha promised that lies beyond our suffering. And in the end, the paradox of welcoming our suffering is the paradox of the Buddhist path itself. That is, by embracing the reality of suffering, we have a way to transcend it. So that is the paradox of welcoming our suffering.